Hey guys, it's Adam. How are you guys doing today? So recently a friend of mine asked if I could fix or remake a key that had broken for one of his family members' antique cabinets. I said, sure, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm sure I can figure it out. So upon getting the key, I find out it's a broken cast key. We're going to try to fix this one, but we're also going to try to make some new ones out of brass. So, since I've never done this before, we really had to sit down and come up with a hard plan of how we're going to do this. And that's kind of how this went. So, after some delicious candy, grab some measuring tools. Tape measure will work, but calipers definitely help. Sat down, took measurements of most of the parts of the key. Once we got those measurements down, it was time to order some brass. Made a quick order on Amazon, got some brass plate and a brass rod, a little bit bigger than what I actually needed. That way I had some wiggle room. Best to have more than not enough. Then came Mr. Hacky Saw. We chopped up some of the brass and got it ready to chuck into the lathe. So here I'm going to start working on the shank part of the key. Got that chucked up into the lathe and going to drill out the front of the key to a matching size hole. Once we've got that done, we'll take some eyeball measurements and set up to start making the cuts. So here I'm turning down to get the front part of the key down to the correct size, and off camera I was doing the back end. Only reason I didn't have the camera on was because I needed two hands to actually cut the taper on the back. So once you're done, you should end up with something that closely resembles what you wanted it to look like. So I think we did pretty good here. And then a little bit of wash, rinse, and repeat. And now we have three of them. Not all three are perfect, but they're close. What we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and grab the bar of brass, and it's 1.1 inch. So I just set my calipers to 1.1 inch, marked out some squares. And then we're going to take that over, meet our good buddy Mr. Hacky Saw, and start cutting up some squares. So once you have the squares to the size you need, we need to mark the centers. I use the back side of the hacksaw blade to go corner to corner, and then punch in some holes right in the center, and then we'll take everything over to the drill press. Now that we're at the drill press, we're going to go ahead and bore a small diameter hole to act as a pilot hole, just so when we go to a larger bit, the larger bit doesn't want to wander around on us. Alright, now we've got the larger bit. We're going to go ahead and drill it out to the desired size. It's a little bit undersized, but we'll finish that up with some sandpaper later. Now when they come off the drill press, they'll have some burrs in the center. Just run them over a little bit of sandpaper to smooth everything down, and you're ready for the next step. The next step, I should have got some video. I'm sorry I didn't. But basically I had to use a carriage bolt that I had turned the head down a little bit on and drilled out the center to act as a center point. And then I took a plastic bushing. I believe it came from a TV mounting kit, but thank God for garage trash, right? A little bit of turning on the plastic bushing, and now we have it turned down to the appropriate size, so the center of our little squares will slide onto that. And then we're going to use the live center to press up against it. So that will smash the little square piece on and hold everything nice and tight. Before I did that, I added a piece of leather to it. That way it won't scar up the brass, and it'll give me a little bit of wiggle room for some irregularities. Alright, now that it's chucked into the lathe, we can start turning it round. So take off the corners first, and then you can finish turning it down to the desired shape once you get to the correct diameter. This was a little slow going because I couldn't take too much of a bite at one time just because of the setup. It would slip if I took too much at one time, but at the end it turned out pretty well, and we got three almost identical pieces to add to the key. So the next thing I wanted to do was I wanted to add a little bit more strength to the key from where it originally broke, because it broke where that shank met the key top. So I decided to drill out both ends, both into the shank and the key top. So I re-chucked these back into the lathe, drilled out the hole, and then we did the same thing with the top of the key. We drilled a hole through there to insert some pins. Now hopefully these pins along with the silver solder will make a really, really strong joint. And as you see here, they're all pinned together and ready to go. A little help from Mr. Torch, and we're gonna get things heated up. So what we have here is a little bit of silver solder, the Stay Clean Silver Flux, and Mr. Torch. So what I did is I put the key top into the vise, added the pin to it, and I was gonna do them this way. I decided to flip it around and do it differently. So what I decided to do instead was to put the key shank into the vise. I could put some flux in it, put the pin in, get that nice and hot, and put some solder in there at the thumb part of the key. And as the bottom was still hot, I pushed that down on there, and since I drilled the hole all the way through, it was able to solder from top down. So there should be a very, very strong connection between the silver solder, the pin, and the silver solder and the two keys, or two key parts. So here's the keys straight out of solder. We cleaned them up with the Dremel, with some grinding wheels and some sanding discs. The next thing I did was I decided to cut a bar of the brass out that was the correct height of the tumbler part, the part that actually turns the tumblers. And I did this so I could file the nice groove into it, and we could get a super strong bond between that and the shank of the key. So as you can see, it fits nice and tight. So what we're going to do is take that over to the vise and start getting that soldered up. So I did find that I had a problem of trying to keep the little piece on the shank nice and straight, without holding it with my fingers. So I took some baling wire and made basically a little spring clamp that would hold down onto it. That way I could heat it up and get it all nice and soldered together perfectly without having to worry about it twisting or falling off or anything. So we took Mr. Torch, got him nice and hot. As you can see, the key starts turning a little bit different color, and the solder, the flux starts going black. Add a little bit of silver solder, sucks right into that joint, and it's going to be super strong. Little wet shop towel, cool it off, get that solder to set, and then I'll take it out of the vise with a pair of pliers, because the rest of it's still nice and hot. Dunk it in some water, and it's good to go. Alright, now that we've got them soldered up, they're going to be a little crunchy and crusty with extra solder on them. So our next step is to let them cool off all the way, take them over to the bench, use the Dremel tool with some sandpaper discs and other cleaning tools, get them ground down so they're ready to be marked out. So in order to do that, I get the tooth of the key as clean as I can for right now, and we'll go ahead and lay out a little bit of black Sharpie on there just so we can see some scribe lines. Then I will take the original key, use that as a reference, scribe in the lines, and then we can start using the Dremel with the cutoff wheel to grind in and cut out those actual individual teeth on each key. Once that's all done, do a little bit of final sanding and a little bit of last minute prep work, and then it's ready to go over to the wire wheel. What the wire wheel will do was get rid of all those imperfections and stuff that the sandpaper left behind. Plus it'll give us a nice kind of matte patina. That way you don't have to sand everything to a perfect finish. If you wanted to, you could sand these all the way to 600 or 800 grit and then polish the brass. But I think for a key, it looks more appropriate to not have a fully polished key. So this will give it a nice brushed brass look. So here's one before and one after the wire wheel. I think it looks nice. Here's the original cleaned up after it's been repaired, and one of the new keys as well. So hopefully at least one of the three of these will actually work. I'm pretty confident that at least 2 of the 3 new ones will work, and of course the old one will work just fine. So I'll be delivering these soon to the person that requested them, and may have to do a few little touch-ups, file out a little bit on the keys here and there to make them work perfectly. But all in all, it was a good learning experience, and I enjoyed doing it. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time. We have not a how-to video, but a how did I do it video, if that makes sense. Thanks.